Today I'm here with another episode of Pages from Sages, and this time we're going to take a quick look at this little book by Roger Olson called Questions to All Your Answers, moving beyond folk religion to examined faith. And I love this book. It's a short book. See, it's not very long. You could read it in a day or two. But what I like about this book is Olson goes through, Roger Olson, and he's a Baptist theologian, and he takes 10 cliche folk religion sayings or thoughts that you may have heard that have just been, imbibed through osmosis within the church. And he examines them in depth. He's like, well, you've heard this, but really think about this. And it's something that, I'll give you an example, some of the titles, the folk religion saying followed by his question. God is in control. Well, why is the world in such a mess? Jesus is the answer. So what's the question? The Bible has all the answers. So what about cloning? God has a perfect plan for your life. So what if you miss it? Jesus is coming soon. So are you buying life insurance? All sins are equal. So reusing a stamp is as bad as murder? Judge not. So how can we preach? Money isn't bad, but only what we do with it. So why did Jesus say it's hard for a rich man to enter heaven? I love these questions because he goes and he examines, and there's so many other folk religion, folk theological maxims that you've probably heard and picked up over the years. But what is folk religion? Let me just tell you what he calls it. This is right from the introduction so you'll understand what he's saying. He says, one of my basic presuppositions is that God cares what we think about him and how we interpret and communicate the faith. God has given us a pretty large book known as the Bible because he wants us to know him. And that implies thinking right thoughts about him. Can we ever get the faith totally right? I don't think so. We're finite and fallen, so there will always be some element of distortion, even in our best attempts to understand and articulate the gospel. But that does not excuse sloppy Christian thinking, let alone no Christian thinking at all. The pastoral concern driving this little book is that far too many contemporary evangelical Christians have succumbed to what sociologists of religion call folk religion. And so he talks about the problem that folk religion is because it distorts the gospel, it gives people a misunderstanding about the God of Scripture, and it presents a false view of the Christian faith to the outside world. I mean, think of how Olson's an evangelical. I'm an evangelical. Right now, the word evangelical in our society means something that has nothing to do with what actual evangelicalism is. It's been hijacked by folk religion, by conservative politics, by all of these stereotypes of how we're supposed to be, those evangelicals, how they're supposed to look at things like institutional racism, refugee and immigrant rights, all these issues that our society, we've talked about before, just lumps people into one or the other. And so part of what Christians have to do, and what I strive to do through the ministry of Disciple Dojo and our teaching, podcast, video series, all that, is to destroy folk religion and get people to see biblical faith. Because the two are not the same, and far too many people rely on folk religion for their theology. Olson goes on to say, try an experiment. Watch a selection of programs on religious television networks, or browse the shelves of any Christian bookstore. I think you'll quickly find a lot of variety and much questionable material. Yet many contemporary Christians think it's okay and even spiritual to swallow it all, hook, line, and sinker. If Paul were alive today, I'm sure he'd say to them, test them all. Socrates is supposed to have said, the unexamined life is not worth living. A Christian philosopher paraphrased Socrates, the unexamined faith is not worth believing. Many Christians will shudder at such a statement. Why? Because evangelical pietism, which often really is pietism gone to seed, revels in, quote, heart religion, focused almost exclusively on feelings and acts of the will with little or no intellectual content. Somehow we've equated hard thinking about the faith with a lack of spiritual fervor. Even to raise an honest question about a popularly believed evangelical religious urban legend is enough to provoke prayers on behalf for your spiritual renewal. All too often, contemporary popular Christianity leads people to think that spirituality and hard thinking stand in conflict with each other. That could not be further from the truth. Hard thinking is what Christians are commanded to do. Love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Jesus specifically inserted the phrase mind when he quoted the Shema in the Gospels. That's what the call of a disciple is, not to shirk away or shy away from questions of the faith. It's not to ever leave something as, well, you can't ask that. You can't question that. You know, my mom always taught me growing up, God's big enough to handle any of your questions. And that's something that I saw a video on YouTube of a pastor kind of bragging to his congregation because he dismissed a kid that had questions and talked about, smacking him because he was too smart for his own good. And I just thought, what a moron. What an utterly unbiblical, foolish way to lead people. No, as Christians, and especially as Christians with the responsibility of preaching and teaching, we should strive for nothing less than the highest intellectual, academic, philosophical standards in how we engage with other people and in how we ourselves think about God. There's too much folk religion out there. It dominates social media. You thought Christian TV was bad? Good Lord. Blogs and Christian social media is rampant with folk theology. And what it does is it replaces the actual biblical faith with this bastardized version, either right-wing or left-wing or something far out, and gets people to see that as the gospel, or that is what Christians believe. And I'm constant. I wouldn't say I'm amazed, but I'm constantly delighted when I talk and get to know and do jujitsu with and train alongside and have dinner with and hang out with people who aren't Christians and who don't even have a great view of Christians, but who get along with me and are shocked that an evangelical, southern, white male Christian Bible teacher could have anything in common with them or want to just hang out with them without having like a sermon in my back pocket ready to preach to them. And the ones that know me, though, they realize, oh, he actually cares about us as a person. And he actually doesn't rebuff these questions that I bring to him. I had a friend a good friend of mine, and we were out having dinner one night, and he had some drinks, and I had some my half Coke, half Diet Coke, because that's how I roll. And he was just like rapid firing these questions at me that were potentially controversial and divisive if they had been thrown out on social media. But we had probably for about an hour and a half a great conversation, and we ended up disagreeing heavily on some things, but we understood where the other was coming from. And that's not possible in a mind dominated by folk religion, because folk religion doesn't challenge you to go dig for answers like Disciple Dojo does. Folk religion doesn't challenge you to reach across religious, political, ethnic, sexual, gender orientation lines and actually befriend another person and get to know them and listen to them before you ever start preaching a single word to them, letting them know that you genuinely love them and care about them. Folk religion doesn't have time for any of that. All folk religion wants to do is get you to subscribe to their blog, to listen to their podcast, to vote the way they vote, whether you want to make America great again or whether you want to be a red letter Christian. Basically those are just code for am I right wing, am I left wing? And folk religion wants you to be one of the wings. It does not want you to be the whole bird. And then the Christian faith, the gospel, is a whole bird message. It balances and it doesn't settle. It balances both wings and it doesn't settle for the cliches and it doesn't settle for the unexamined faith. So when you go to a church, any church, it's pretty obvious, and I say this after maybe about 20 years in ministry now, it's pretty obvious that the majority of people that go to church on a daily basis get most of their beliefs from some form of folk religion. Whether it's books they read, TV show they watch, a certain preacher they like, a blog that they love, whatever it is. And what we want to do as believers, and what I want to do through the ministry of Disciple Dojo, is push people. Say, that's not enough. That's not good enough. Dig. think, reason, use your mind. Don't shy away from questions. Don't say, oh, well, you just got to believe. Or don't say, well, that's above my head, so I'll never understand it. It's just going to be me and Jesus. Yeah, it's going to be you and Jesus, but Jesus is the one who's like, hey, whatever level of mind I've given you, we're not all Stephen Hawking, but that's okay. Whatever I've given you, use that to the best of your ability. And so Olson's a great example. I definitely recommend Questions to All Your Answers. It's a great book. Even if you end up disagreeing with Olson, I think there were one or two parts where I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. But it doesn't matter because it was incredibly well written, well argued, and really entertaining to those of us, especially who were raised in church and have seen all kinds of folk religion. So check it out. If you like this video, again, if you want to see more of these, I want to do more of these as part of the ministry of Disciple Dojo. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. If I were like a YouTube vlogger, I'd say click the link right here. I don't know how to do any of that. It's just me, and I just want to get this content out to you. So check it out. Support us. DiscipleDojo.org. If you like what we're doing, then love to have you partner with us because we need it. That's it. Have a great week, month, year, however long between this and when you click on the next video. And I will see you later.